Hello, everyone, on this Wednesday, September 23rd. I can't believe it's already close to the end of the month here. We're really moving along. It's also the 11th episode of the Deep Water MMA Podcast. I'm your host, Connor Northrup. I'm joined by my favorite MyMMANews trio. We'll start off with my regular co-host, Lucas Grandsire. What's up, Lucas?
Hey, what's going on, man? Excited to talk about all these fun topics today, and with our favorite guest from MyMMANews, of course, John.
What's going on, guys? It's great to be back on the program. I love coming on and talking with you guys. I think this is my third time, maybe it's even my fourth. I don't know, but every time that we come on here, it's always a lot of fun, so I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's your third, and also too, a lot has changed. I think as far as our setups since then. Lucas has a completely different. Well, I think we all have different backgrounds. Lucas has changed locations, but he's got the mic upgrade. You obviously have the studio upgrade.
Here it is, the official John Eric Poli studio. So, yeah, we're up and running here, and the last couple of weeks have been interviews out of here. I've been enjoying it. How about you guys? How have the interviews been going on your guys' end, by the way?
Lucas, you want to go first?
No, I mean, it's going well. It's looking good. Made some upgrades here, like added some lights and stuff. So I think, the quality is pretty good in terms of the video, and everything's been going well.
Yeah. As far as who I've been interviewing, I feel like I haven't been doing that many. I've been doing kind of doing 2 or 3 a week. I think kind of keeping it steady like that. There was some weeks where I was doing almost like 10 a week, but I've definitely cut back from that.
Jeez, Connor showing us all up here. Everyone else here is trying to get
I don't burn myself out either, so. So anyways, exactly. Always have been, but anyways, it's like it. This show isn't about me. It's about MMA media, that kind of stuff. And obviously, like Lucas said, tons to talk about. I mean, I was actually looking at our questions today. I realized we're not even talking about Khamzat Chimaev. You also had Mackenzie Dern put away Ronda Marcos. We'll get into Covington later too, but you also had Nico Price kind of getting overexcited about a draw with Donald Cerrone. So that was pretty comical, I thought. And also this weekend, I mean, I think everyone who's an MMA fan, even those who maybe aren't, are excited about this UFC 253, the Adesanya, obviously Costa, but there's a lot more to offer on that card, obviously, than just those two guys. I think a lot of people are even forgetting Bellator is this weekend too. They're in, I think, Milan, Italy, and then Bracef too. And for anyone who wants to actually see that tomorrow, I'll be doing live updates of that tomorrow afternoon, which sounds weird that fights are at noon, but I'll be there for that. And before we talk about none of that, let's go into you guys. For John, what kind of some stuff you've been working on this week? Who have you been interviewing? Things like that.
Well, actually, guys, it's funny. Right before we hopped on here, I just got off of doing an interview with Sijara Eubanks, who's fighting this weekend at UFC 253. So, for me, today was super, exciting. I believe I started the interview off this way by saying, whenever you have a pay-per-view for the UFC, it's that fight week, it's just that amped up feeling, and then be talking to somebody that was fighting this weekend, just add it to that. And Sijara was a great interview. That'll be up later on today at MyMMANews. Make sure everyone goes check that out. Pretty much to give everybody just a brief recap of what we talked about, though, is just her pretty much breaking down her fight. She was talking about what it was like being out there on Fight Island, taking the fight on short notice, and not having Mark Henry in her corner this week because with her taking it on short notice, Mark Henry wasn't able to make it out there. So we talked about a couple different things. It was about a 12-minute interview, and it was a pretty solid interview too. I was very proud of it, and looking forward to putting that out there later on today.
Yeah, she has a crazy story too because she's making such a quick turnaround too, and also she doesn't have Mark Henry, but I think she also won't have Sean Santella either because he's headlining the Brave card tomorrow as well. Mm-hmm. So I think just Ryan Safaro out of her regular corner is going to be in there. But for you, Lucas, who are some of the guys that you kind of been talking to?
Well, I've been collecting the women's flyweights recently. I think all 3 days in a row because I had Lauren Murphy yesterday, Jillian Robertson the day before, Courtney Casey today. So I'm making a neat little collection. I've talked to a bunch of the Bellator people. I've been collecting a bunch of those 2 prelim guys, main cards. I talked to Costello Van Steenis recently, and I get a message from Bellator Europe asking me hey, is it cool if we use a snippet of your interview? Hell yeah. So that's going well. I talked to Akon Wanless, who, during the interview, I just drops this bombshell. He's like, from my days as a male stripper. So, I was like, hold on. It's like, stop all the fighting stuff. We need to know the times as a male stripper. I was like, you have to tell me. He's like, I don't even think Bellator knows. So I was like, ooh, sitting on a little potential gold mine. But yeah, collecting all these interviews and stuff like that. And just trying to get back in the rhythm now that I'm back in the States and I have this, neat little setup.
Yeah.
Lucas, don't lie to us. We know that you asked him where he was a male stripper because you wanted to send your resume in there. We know it. I know
Of
it.
course,
Come on.
of course. I was like, I've watched Magic Mike. I'm inspired. I mean, it's like, can it be just for anyone or?
Well, everyone's trying to find their shtick nowadays, right? So that could be yours, maybe.
Yeah, the male stripper MMA journalist. Like I'll strip during these interviews. I'll start. Got to get the fans in somehow, right?
Lucas just hanging off of a pole somewhere while he's doing the interview, twisting around.
Yeah.
All right, exactly. Just stop the interview. What are your thoughts on the fight, and what are your thoughts on me?
We're getting a little crazy here. Get back on the thing, but that is great though. Like when someone does say something like that, because it is one of those things where you're just like in your head, you're just like like almost like the light bulb goes off, and you're just like, oh, like this is like gonna be good stuff here too. That clickable content, if you will. Exactly. But yeah. I actually haven't done any interviews yet this week, but I have actually at 10:30 tonight, which I really regret that. But Ali Al-Kazi, I think he lost his UFC debut. He's turned around to fight Tony Kelly. He's the first Jordan fighter to be in the UFC, so I'm looking forward to talking to him. And I got Chris Dawkins, who's going into his second UFC fight. I'm talking to him on Saturday too. So I kind of later interviews. Eric had offered me one today, but I just wasn't. I think it was Damon Jackson from this past week, but I wasn't able to do that one. So
yeah, that was the same with me too. He offered me, but obviously with I had Sajara Eubanks at 1 o'clock today, and I'm with you guys at 3. It was just too hard cutting it in that window and before, because you guys are big time here. I can't push you guys to the side.
I was going to say thank you for choosing us over Damon Jackson. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, guys.
All right. So we are going to keep the show a little shorter today, and so we'll kind of hop right into this past weekend. I mean, that's pretty much what we're talking about. A little Michael Chandler question later on, but we'll start off with the main event, obviously, and take it what you will. Woodley, obviously, he lost his third straight, and to me, it almost felt like a decision because it did go so long, but he did lose via TKO, I guess, but it was the rib popping out that kind of did the job there. But I mean, I think that fight was kind of heading towards that direction anyway. But besides that, too, obviously the big question now is with those 3 losses, what's next for Woodley? So we'll keep it simple here, John. What's next for Tyron Woodley?
Yes, actually, on my Matchmaker Monday piece, I actually wrote I thought retirement should be next, and I know Dana White was actually the one that was headed into that direction. Usually when Dana White's telling guys they should retire, that's usually a good sign that they probably should. So I kind of leaned on Dana White's side of that. The other thing of why, I would go in that direction is because I think it's clear now after looking at Tyron's last 3 fights against Usman, Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, who are obviously Usman's now the champ. Covington, or I believe Burns might be the number 1 contender over Covington in the rankings, but whatever. 1A and 1B pretty much. Whoever's 101 and whoever's 2 there. He was shut out. He might as well 15 rounds to none. He lost. He lost every single round of those fights. 5 to Usman, 5 to Burns, and what would have been 5 to Covington until the fight was obviously stopped there. So if you're Tyron Woodley, I don't see where you're going to make a path towards a championship run again. So it's up to him. I mean, if he really wants to fight, go out there and, hey, you want to do it, Godspeed. But does he really want to be going out there and not going to make a run towards the championship? Because it's pretty clear that there's a large gap in competition between the top 3 guys right now and Tyron Woodley.
Lucas?
The unfortunate thing for me is, going into the fight, obviously we saw everyone, I don't know how it looked on your social media, but I was seeing everyone's like, oh, this is the time for Tyron Woodley to turn back the clock. It really seemed like everybody was rooting for Tyron. And the question going in is, how is he mentally? Does he still want it? Is he motivated? And it's like, if this wasn't the fight to get you motivated, I don't know what the fight is. First of all, there's beef coming in from years ago because Colby was claiming he did stuff to you. And then it turned political, right? The fight somehow turned into Make America Great Again versus Black Lives Matter. So there's so much narrative where it's like, look, if you can't get up for this one, if this isn't the one where you're trying to knock this guy's head off, what fight's going to do that for you? Where I am critical of the UFC a little bit is the matchmaking, though. You've got a former champion who's having trouble against guys with good ground game, who's putting the pressure to him, and they choose to give him Colby Covington next. That's literally the kind of matchups that he's losing. So I didn't like that matchup in this one. I didn't like that he came 4, 5, 3 years too late, however long that was. But yeah, I mean, what's next for him? I like a good retirement fight. Uriah Faber tried to do that, and then of course the MMA retirements did his thing when he faced Brad Pickett a few years ago. But for me, Tyron Woodley, either retirement, I think that's the best option. But if we were to match make him, I'd like to see a rematch against Robbie Lawler. I feel like that could be an interesting one. Obviously, Nick Diaz, you could convince me. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to convince me, but it's got to be maybe one last, hoorah, and then thank you, Tyron, hang it up. But there's no way this is a long-term thing. You're 38, you're pushing 40. It really showed me all the signs out there that Tyron Woodley is just it's over at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Lawler match, it makes sense, but like I'm kind of leaning towards John too. Like I just don't I don't need that, like I don't need that, especially after like what we saw these last 3 times too. I think that's enough sample size to kind of be like I think you said it perfect, Lucas. Like if that fight wasn't going to get him, amped up and want to, put on this like great performance, then what is? He just looked like drained. He looked like a guy who honestly, like even like when he was talking in his corner too, was just kind of bizarre because you just kind of felt that sense of like, the corner was kind of pushing that urgency, but he really wasn't kind of answering that. And, then obviously it ended the way they did. But yeah, I just don't think there's a lot of options for Woodley too, because like you said, there's obviously that gap between, I think it was John that said, between those top 3 guys, but Woodley fought a lot of those guys, right? Like he lost to Usman. Obviously he's not going to get that. Burns and now Covington, and obviously Masvidal has his hands tied, but like that's another fight that like it just doesn't make sense to me to even book that. It's like, what has Woodley shown where he's gonna be able to compete with a guy like that? So, and I don't think he should really go any lower either. With because what are you gonna get him, like an up and comer? Like I don't think he's gonna do well against an up and comer either. So I think it's a weird situation, and also I think Woodley, and I don't know if you guys touched on this yet, but I think he's a guy that's got options too, as far as like outside of the cage, right? Like he has done commentating, he has done like different TV shows and acting, things like that. So I think he definitely has a career outside of MMA. So maybe that's time for him to kind of see where to go. I think on Monday, I think he was on social media, he said that he's not going to retire, but we'll see what happens. But obviously it's his choice to make. Yeah. But I'm leaning towards I think he should retire.
Yeah, one interesting thing, I don't know if you guys saw it during the week too. I follow Chael Sonnen like religiously. He's like the one go-to person that I watch religiously pretty much. Every morning I look out for his new pieces on YouTube. And he threw it out there very, very briefly that Tyron should maybe move up to 185. Obviously, he does have a win over Darren Till, who's a top contender up there. But again, my thing that concerns me though when I look at Tyron is just the way those last 3 fights go. Those guys have all smothered him right in his face with the pressure. And until Tyron can show people that if you're going to smother him, he's going to be able to handle that, it's going to be the same thing in all of this fights. I think the blueprint's out there. So unless Tyron makes some type of huge adjustment that we don't know about, we're pretty much going to see the same type of fights.
Yeah, because it's not even the fact that he lost 3 fights in a row. It's like he lost 3 fights in a row the same exact way. Like it was just he was doing the same things in each of those fights. It's like, and even I think it was after the Usman fight going into the Burns fight, he was like, oh yeah, I spent all that time, fixing those mistakes, and I'm a new fighter, and I refound that hunger and all this. And then it's like, well, now you have 2 fights since then, and for us, it doesn't seem like you found that. So,
well, the thing with Tyron too is that he's always had the issue in his career of a low output, right? Like how many fights have people been frustrated how boring it was? I don't know if you guys were still awake for the entire fight, that second Stephen Thompson fight. Like, good Lord, half the fight is just them sizing each other up. Like, I think he's always had an issue with it, but at this point, it's like even worse. Like, he won some fights by the skin of his teeth just because, he still had that power, but it's disappointing. I think for a lot of fans, you tend to imagine that every fighter ends their career like Chuck Liddell. Like when you get flatlined 3 times in a row, that's a sign that it's over. But when guys aren't throwing anymore, when they're getting smothered, I mean, especially Tyron, like he's got a great skill set, great wrestling, incredibly fast, big power, and he's just not showing it. Like, that's a sign that a fighter's done too. When you see that mentally they're not there. And you did touch on 185. I think it was interesting because during fight week, he didn't look good physically, right? He looked drained. I thought it might have been a tough cut. But listen, if Colby Covington and Kamaru and those guys are out muscling you at 170, there's no way that 185 is going to be any different. And at 5'9", he's going to be way undersized. Like, he did some big things too, like outside of the cage, including being in Straight Outta Compton. I mean, that was a huge movie, right? Obviously, his role was muscle-bound badass who didn't talk, but it shows that he has options. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, I really don't see what's the point of coming back when you have these options and you also don't look that great in the cage anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And now we'll kind of transition over to the second half of that main event. Colby Covington, he's obviously the winner of the bout. And what we're going to kind of talk about here is not so much maybe what he did in that cage, but some of the shenanigans that happened afterwards. He obviously took Woodley down, kind of smothered, but after that, and dare I say, I think his post stuff was kind of more entertaining, if you will. He obviously received a phone call from the president, and back and forth exchange words with Usman, and kind of called out guys like LeBron James and other athletes. So I know, Lucas, this was one that you were kind of looking forward to. So we'll start with you on this one. Is that Covington's kind of make America great again shtick? Is it getting old?
Well, I mean, the thing is, just to put some context, for the fight, since this was a great fight night card, I had a few friends over, super casuals, where every fight you have to sell them on why should you care. And when Colby won, I was like, okay, listen to this guy, because he's got this "Make America Great Again" shtick and stuff. And they're like, Lucas, you're exaggerating. And if you guys remember the post-fight speech, he goes straight into his shtick, and everyone's like, oh my god. So I think it helped him get to a big point, but I think he's taking it too far. I mean, the argument with Kamaru Usman could have been really funny. Like, imagine someone like Rampage, right, getting in an argument like that with another fighter. It could have been entertaining, but you're talking about like his contacting by his tribe, smoke signals. I mean, it's gotten to a point where I think he's taking it too far. And we've seen all the other Nigerian fighters, including guys like Hakeem Dawodu, who's saying, that's racist, that's against my people. And I think it's a sign that you've taken it too far at this point. Like I understand it's what got you there, but at some point it's like you kind of have to level off. And he's taking it further. I mean, I know the president's calling him, so you could potentially look at it like, well, maybe he's doing something right, but I'm not sure you're appealing to the right kind of fan at this point. And it's giving a very negative image of MMA as well. Like when people are talking about, a bunch of cavemen in the cage or, human cockfighting. And now I see posts from people who don't follow MMA talking about, this racist guy, Colby, coming after our LeBron James and stuff. Like I think it's a sign that he's taking it too far. And when you have people bringing up racism, it's a sign that you took the shtick too far. And you definitely have to find a point where you market yourself correctly, but take it down a notch. So at this point, like I said, he took it too far for me this weekend.
How about you, John? You tired of Kobe's shenanigans?
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually a fan of Colby in the way how he goes about it, mainly because it's entertaining and it gets obviously the fans fired up and everything else. Whenever Colby fights, like just the way how he handles himself makes in for a great fight week. Everyone's following along and it's fun. But I do agree, though, to the point that Lucas was making there, that he does always take like that step too far. And that's always been, the thing is when's going to come back and bite him in the ass, so to speak. Now you're starting to see, like, with this whole Black Lives Matter pushback and the way how he went after LeBron, because LeBron's been on the front lines of this Black Lives Matter movement. So I think you're starting to see a little bit of that now. But, I mean, overall, though, I am a fan of what Colby's done. It is entertaining. And going back to CLP's son, and yet again, I remember the one day when he was talking about Colby, he was saying about how you need to stick to that type of stuff all the time, because at some point, people might be booing you. They might hate you. There might be times where, people are saying that you're crossing the line, all that stuff. But then there's going to be a point where people are going to like you, and they're not going to want to see you act differently. They're going to expect this all the time. And when it's time for you to stop fighting and retire, that people are going to be upset and they're going to miss this side of you. So I guess it kind of goes both ways. I think you got to take the good with the bad with it.
Yeah. I feel like Kobe's the kind of guy, though, like, he's not worried about that. And, like, I think with him, it's like he picked this shtick for a reason. And I think for him, it's like, well, even if he does go too far and even if it does maybe turn some negative attention, I think for Kobe, I think he almost looks at it as, negative attention is good attention. Like, you're still going to tune in. You're still going to want to see him get, whether you want to see him win or lose, people are still going to be tuning in for him. And I feel like that's kind of what he's done, I think, really well, because, like, even, like, from this whole thing, it was like, when was the last time we saw a president, like, call? Obviously, I think that was definitely planned, I think, in my opinion, but, like, when have we ever seen that? Like, we've never seen a president call a UFC fighter right after their fight and have that too. And, like, even, like, with Kobe too, I just thought maybe, like, you were kind of saying too, like, maybe sometimes, like, you almost, like, lose yourself, like, in that character and that kind of thing. And I thought with, like, Kobe, when he actually talked to Trump, I thought that was kind of cool because, like, you just see a smile. Like, it reminded me like a kid on Christmas. Like, he actually looked genuinely, like, happy that he was talking to this guy that, like, he maybe, has some respect for. So, I see where people could take it negative and everything, but I I don't feel like Kobe's. I don't know if his stock really rose up too much in this fight, but I also don't think it like went that far down either.
Yeah, I feel like with Colby, like he's in that spot. Like you expect to see something like this out of him. So now obviously, if let's say him and Usman were to rematch, obviously now you're going to have that bad blood's going to make in for a huge fight, and Colby obviously helps sell that. The only thing that Colby I would say would have to probably ever watch for, like right now everything's going for him, but God forbid if he ever says the wrong thing, he's going to lose a bunch on sponsorships and stuff like that. Like Bang Energy, I think, is one of his big sponsors. He's been doing commercials with, and that was it My Bookie, where he always has the girls around and let's make our bank accounts great again stuff. Like all it takes is one slip up, and you lose all of that. So obviously, that's the thing he has to be careful and he has to watch out for, because he flirts with the line big time with a lot of the stuff that he does. And again, I think it depends on, like, we're in a tough guy sport that we cover here. So obviously, a lot of times, like, we could handle stuff like that, but for other people, they can't. I bring up maybe an example from college football a few years ago. I'm not sure if you guys are big college football fans or all that, but Baker Mayfield, when he was playing for Oklahoma, Kansas, I believe they were playing Kansas, it was, and the guys wouldn't shake his hand before the game. So he throws a touchdown pass, and I forget if he gave him the finger or if he grabbed his crotch at them, but that was to college football people. Oh, what a shameful act. He shouldn't be in the Heisman Trophy running. How distasteful. Meanwhile, in our sport, you guys want to touch gloves, both guys might give each other the finger, So
Yeah.
Again, that's where you have to watch and draw the line with things, because for people in our, end of things might be okay, but the second you start getting to the outside people that aren't super big fans, you never know what's going to happen with those people.
Yeah. That was like when Benson Henderson fought Nate Diaz. Like, it kept blacking out, and everyone's like, why is it like blacking out? Like, it was because Diaz kept giving Henderson the finger, and I think that fight was on Fox, so they had to keep blacking it out every time he did it because they couldn't react fast enough. But I think with Kobe, like you said, I think he's kind of towed that line, but like I don't know if he's really gone over that line. And like I just think because like a lot of the stuff I feel like we heard him say, it's not any different than like some of these other like people are saying as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I listen, exactly. And there's like things that Colby says sometimes that I'm like, you know what, I can actually see where Colby's coming from with this type of stuff. But again, in the world that we live in too, where people say that what's the word they use, liberal snowflakes they say about people, so to speak. But like if you get any, I mean, it in today's day and age, it's easy to offend somebody. Super easy. You don't have to do much to offend people. So again, in our end of the sport, like because we're used to seeing antics like this, I think we're okay with it. But like again, like I said, there's the outside people that you got to watch. I believe Lucas, I think you were the person that brought it up about like all of a sudden the NBA people are noticing Colby Covington because of the things with LeBron James. So all of a sudden to these people, Colby looks like this horrible prick, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's just the point that I was getting at. Like depending on what he says, you don't know those outside groups of people how they're going to take it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to push back a little bit because I know Connor said he didn't cross the line. For me, he did cross the line. I think for a long time he was close to it. I mean, even take someone like John mentioned, Chael Sonnen, and even with his comments about Brazil, people weren't quite sure where they lie. But I think the fact that Colby made it too political, it's one thing to put "Make America Great Again," wear the hat. Donald Trump calls you. It's fine. Like it's a part of your shtick. But when you get to the point where you're calling people that support Black Lives Matter a terrorist, when you're, making fun of Kamaru Usman for being from Africa and stuff, and you have all these fighters speaking out about, we were offended by Colby's comment. I mean, these are fighters, right? We know sometimes they can be a little sensitive to stuff, but they are tough people at the end of the day. And they're saying, we took offense to that was racist towards me and my culture. I think for me, that's a sign he took it over the line. And I think it's, it's interesting because I think we are at some point desensitized, right? Some of these fighters, they'll say horrible things to each other, but we're used to it. It's fun, but I think Colby's making it not quite as fun anymore and taking it for me a little bit too far. I enjoy a good shtick. I mean, the beef before the fight is awesome, but you have to find a line between what's in good taste and what's like too personal, what's taking it a step too far.
Yeah, Lucas, when you were saying that, it almost kind of reminded me of we remember when Connor and Khabib fought, and Connor was relentless on Khabib's religion and his family and everything else. And then Khabib wins the fight, wouldn't let go of the choke briefly. That wasn't super bad. I heard Beans at the time like a second or third time there, give him a little bit of a shake. That wasn't super, super terrible. But he obviously jumps over the cage, all hell breaks loose inside of the octagon. Vegas is going crazy. It's all over the news the next day. And then Khabib's made out to be the bad guy everywhere for jumping over the cage. Right. And to people that don't really follow the sport too much, as the person that does, I had to tell them, like, well, you don't understand. Connor threw a dolly through a bus window trying to attack this guy, hurt a bunch of other people, then goes out there. You know how religious Muslim people are. He's making fun of their religion. He's talking about Khabib's wife, talking about his father, all this stuff. And then all this anger gets built up. And then that, unfortunately, is what the end result ended up being. And, that's the thing is you have to watch out is you don't want to have this negative black eye that could take place in all this. So there kind of has to be, I don't know if there has to be a line necessarily drawn, but Colby, again, he's flirted with wherever this line would be at certain moments. So it's just a matter of making sure he doesn't overdo it where all chaos is going to break loose.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll move on to something that's not UFC on ESPN Plus 36 related. Michael Chandler, obviously, he enters the UFC, which I think towards the end there, I think more people were starting to kind of realize that maybe that was where it was going and, making quite a splash, right? He's going to be the backup for Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. Obviously, there's been lots of going on with Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier. Obviously, those two want to fight each other too. But my question here is there anyone more deserving of that backup spot than Michael Chandler? And if so, who and why? And we'll start with John with this one.
Well, I think there's probably a number of people, mainly anybody that has fought in the UFC and currently has a number next to their name. Because don't get me wrong, I think Michael Chandler is great. And I think that he could come inside and he can make a splash and he could be right in the mix of things. But we know how the UFC's 155-pound division is. That's murderer's row. So you could give Chandler a fight against a top 10 guy or a top 5 guy even. He could come right in there and win, and then he could fight somebody else's next fight and lose. And that's the same for anybody else in that division. But it's kind of a risky move. And to me, it's like, are they doing it for the numbers part of it? Of like, oh, what if Chandler gets this opportunity? Because Chandler has a big following that we know of. Or is this just a matter of who else wanted? Because you can tell that Poirier was all about wanting more money. So he's like, if you gave it to Poirier, is he going to really take that and go through a fight camp and weigh in if he wants more money just to fight other people? Like, I'd imagine the pay would be an issue on his end. Tony Ferguson, I think he's also looking for a fight. I feel like him and Poirier generally want to fight each other too. So then all of a sudden, like, who are you really getting into then? Because we don't know what's up with Paul Felder at the moment. Dan Hooker's banged up after his fight. Do you go as far low as Oliveira? I don't have the rankings pulled up in front of me. It'd be nice to pick if we actually.
He's right around there, yeah.
But you know what I mean. So and Oliveira doesn't have a fight book, so I guess it's up to the fighters though, because you're taking a big chance of going out there to weigh in, step on the scale, and not even have a fight. And it's one thing if you're guaranteed a title fight or something along those lines afterwards, but we've seen it two ways so far that I could remember. And if there's more, please tell me. I'll gladly admit that I'm running this off the top of my head. But Kamaru Usman for the Darren Till Woodley fight did that. He ended up getting the next title fight, I believe, or did he fight Dos Anjos for? Regardless, so he had like at least a title elimination to get that opportunity. Then you had Alexander Volkov at heavyweight. Was it for one of the Stipe DC fights? He weighed in. Look where he's at now. It wasn't guaranteed a big fight. Ended up losing one or two. Or was that when Derek Lewis may have knocked him out? Maybe after that in a real close fight, but still like went downhill. So you're taking a gamble by doing this. So I just don't know. Is this a matter of did guys not want it and that's why Chandler's here? Or is this the, hey, Bellator fans, hey, everybody that likes Michael Chandler, Chandler might be fighting for a UFC title. Let's go check it out and try to push the needle that way.
Yeah. I don't see how, like, other guys not wanting it, though. Like, I can't see, like, I don't know. I just feel like if you ask, like a Tony Ferguson, because I think you could look at that two ways. One, you run it back with Gaethje. Two, you finally get the Nurmagomedov fight that you've been wanting for a long time. But anyways, before I go, we'll go with Lucas.
I think it's a third option, John, a third option that you're forgetting. Think about when you're negotiating with a used car salesman. You got to throw in that little extra incentive to make it happen. That's the incentive. It's like we're negotiating numbers. Well, I'm sure Chandler and his manager were like, well, we want to fight for the title. We don't have that long. And I'm sure to seal the deal was probably like, you know what, we'll just make you a backup. And it is a gamble.
That's a good one. That's a very good one.
And it is a gamble because like we'll make you a backup. And then you hope in the back of your mind that we won't actually have to do that. Like, listen, And the weird thing is people talk about it like, oh, well, if he is a backup, we're going to see Khabib versus Chandler, but we could see Gaethje versus Chandler too. So I think it was just a negotiation, a show of good faith. Like, listen, you will probably fight for a title at some point, and they're just taking that gamble. If it would be very weird for him to come over from Bellator and just get a straight title shot, considering he beat Benson Henderson last. I mean, it's a weird one. But in terms of more deserving, it's a weird situation, right? Because Khabib has beaten everybody. Ferguson's coming off a loss, but for me, I think we have to go with the Diamond, Dustin Poirier. I think that's the guy coming off a great victory. It'd be a little bit weird to see a rematch with Khabib because I strongly doubt he goes any differently, but a rematch versus Gaethje would be great too. But for me, I think Poirier was more deserving. But to come back to the original point, I think it was just a negotiation tactic and just a show that if you join the UFC, you're gonna be at the top and you're gonna be close to a title shot. And we're not gonna give you the Gaethje route where you have Johnson and then smaller names. And we're not necessarily gonna build you up. We're gonna throw you in the Shark Tank early on if you join the UFC.
Yeah. As far as like negotiating too, like you talk about that, but like you also kind of talked about like the Henderson fight, but Chandler actually finished Henderson, which no one has really done in 6 years too. So I think that kind of gave him, a little more room than he would have had if that had gone to like a decision or something. I think that almost was like a little more of a spark too. I think when it ended like that, it was like, well, how could that have ended like any better for him as far as like with his career with Bellator? But yeah, I think it's like between, I kind of like had mapped out, like I had Dustin first. I thought Ferguson and Hooker. The only reason I want to put Ferguson first is just because he's obviously coming off that loss to Gaethje, and Poirier had that loss to Khabib, but he's kind of rebounded with. I mean, some people are calling that fight of the year. So I think when you come off a win like that, obviously I think he's definitely more deserving. And I mean, I understand that Hooker is banged up too, but I think he's definitely a guy that's more deserving than Chandler at this point as well. But I think it's probably like what Lucas said. Like it had to be, I think, some kind of negotiation. I'm not really sure whether route like makes sense. I mean, like, is there anything you guys can like think of that maybe like would be another reason?
Yeah, no, not really. The only other thing, like I was saying before, is maybe that some of these guys didn't want to, go through a training camp and then have to sit there and then weigh in, not have the fight. I mean, Again, that's the big gamble that you take with it. And again, I think like what we were saying with these negotiations, though, it's like let's just say if I'm Dustin Poirier, you want me to go through this fight camp and step on the scale. Let's say I don't get the fight. Well, how much am I getting paid? I imagine you would want at least a championship paycheck out of it. Am I going to be guaranteed the next title fight then? Because I'm the person that stepped on the scale. Whoever wins this fight, I'm next. So I think if something along those lines, if people wanted this and the UFC said no, that's a possibility. Because I imagine they're going to want something pretty, at least halfway decent to go through a camp and step on the scale and not have anything.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, we know that Ferguson, he already doesn't care if he makes weight, doesn't fight. He already did it. He did it a few weeks before he fought Gaethje, so.
The thing I'm really disappointed in with all this, really, to be honest with you, is the fact that we couldn't get Tony Ferguson and Dustin Poirier as the co-main event. I know Poirier's holding out. He wants more money. I really don't know where he's going with that on that end. Fighting again, it's a big fight, but you're fighting in the co-main event slot, and pretty much was a title elimination fight on a obviously, every fighter signs a contract. So, you celebrate when you sign that contract, and then a couple fights later, you're complaining about it, that you're not happy with your current contract. So that I kind of don't really understand, like kind of where he's going at with that. But I would have loved to have that on the undercard. And if something happened, one of those two guys filled in, probably would have been the easiest and made the most sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was you, John, too, that you're like, it seems like they want to fight each other. I mean, like, yeah, definitely want to fight each other. Ferguson was pretty much begging the UFC to kind of come to terms with Poirier so they could make that happen.
Yeah, so hopefully it happens in the future. Would be nice. I also heard somewhere, like, obviously we know what it's like hearing all the rumblings and seeing things posted everywhere that what they were trying to, I think, get Chandler and Poirier at some point too, but Poirier was trying to be more loyal to Ferguson. He wants the Ferguson fight, so hopefully at some point we can make that happen.
All right.
I mean, at the same time, if you put yourself in these fighters' shoes, you have to think like, hey, we're going to pay you a shit amount of money for a training camp. And then you either get to face the wood chipper that's Gaethje on short notice, or you face Khabib, who's just going to smother you the whole time. I mean, it's a very tough thing to say yes to. And I mean, like you guys mentioned, it's a gamble, but it's a tough position to put a fighter in, especially for someone that's not happy with their pay. So yeah, it's a weird situation for sure.
Yeah, and also too, don't forget, like all these fighters, a lot of them, they have family. You know, they have some of them live, like we use Dustin Poirier, for example, lives in Louisiana, but then fights in Florida. So he has bills he has to play on both ends. And not only that, he's going to go through a fight camp, let's just say, not even get a fight. Well, he's still going to have to pay out his coaches and everything else for a fight that doesn't even happen. So I can see where these guys want to make sure that they're going to, you know, have some extra money in their pockets if they're going to step on the scale. And I don't know if the UFC was willing to either meet these guys, or if these guys were asking for too much. The UFC was like, no, we'll give you this, but that whatever you're asking for is too much. There had to be somewhere, like you were saying, Lucas, there had to be something within the negotiations going on there. And whatever Chandler side presented must have made the most sense in the negotiations.
Alrighty. So I guess we'll pretty much wrap it up here. I mean, now that we've concluded our questions here, John, for you, anything before we go? I mean, it just feels weird that we didn't. I think we only mentioned Chimaev once this whole show.
Yeah, listen. Here's the thing that I actually want to bring up briefly before we head out here is, what's your guys' take? I guess let's go real quick. Your take on the main event for this weekend, because I see a lot of people that are saying that Adesanya is going to, run right through Costa there, that he's going to be too quick and stay on the outside. I don't know. For me personally, I could see if that's in the deep waters that happening, but I think that Adesanya is going to have his hands full for about 10 minutes there. That Costa is going to be a serious threat to that title within 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have Adesanya winning that one. I mean, I trust his striking. I mean, that dude's striking is insane. I mean, the feints, the footwork, everything. I think we might see a similar fight to the Kelvin Gastelum fight, except it's going to be like a version that's on steroids. No, but I think it's going to be a very entertaining contest, and I think we are going to see the deep waters, like the podcast. And no, I think it's going to be a good fight, but I'm definitely leaning towards Adesanya, but it's definitely not going to be an easy one.
Yeah. The problem with always going third is I feel like you guys always take the good stuff, and I'm kind of just there, sweeping whatever I can find. But
I'm just picking up the scraps.
Yeah, but I do kind of feel like Lucas too. I feel like it is Adesanya. I think he will win that fight. But I also agree with you, John, too. I think if there's for Costa, I think if he does, it's got to be kind of in that time frame of when he can, really maybe take it to Adesanya. But I think in the deep waters, I agree with Lucas on that one. So kind of taking a little bit of both of you guys. Not too much original content there. But Lucas, anything before we go?
Yeah, you guys follow me on Twitter, Instagram at Grandsire MMA. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Lucas Grandsire. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
John, do you want to plug in some social media? I don't think you did that yet.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Yeah, follow me on Instagram, Twitter at John Eric Poli, and you'll see all my work that I put out there. I have a YouTube channel, John Eric Poli, but obviously whenever I do interviews or all that, I'm sharing onto those social media accounts. So that's the best spot to go.
Yeah. Lucas, do you have any Joanna news to break to John this time around?
Don't break my heart. Don't break my heart.
I saw the
How
poster.
about that too? You guys like this there right there?
Yeah,
right
I saw the poster. I was like, don't break his heart again. It's like, look, man, I mean.
Hey, she on Instagram the other day in her comments, somebody goes, when you're fighting again? She said next year. I don't know. Maybe she's not tired.
Grasp those straws, John.
Don't worry, I've been seeing the rumblings of the Weili and Rose fight coming up, and obviously, I'm pretty sure Dan Lambert said that if you wanted to get a title fight, he probably would hang it up. So as soon as I see Weili and Rose negotiations, I'm like, no, my heart can't take it. It can't be. So we'll see. I'm still breathing, though. So until my heart officially breaks and puts me in a cardiac arrest, we'll still be doing this.
Yeah. We'll have to make sure we have a show when that happens. I feel like the ratings on that might be pretty good, but. So guys, make sure to follow Deep Water MMA Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. It's just Deep Water MMA Podcast, and our Twitter at MMA_deep. My personal Twitter is CNorthrup732. We got Brave CF tomorrow night, Bellator Milan, and UFC 253 this Saturday, guys. Enjoy the fights. Thanks for watching.